Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, mom, homeschooler, educator. Welcome especially to my brand new subscribers who've come here at the suggestion of Dr. Carlin Borsenko. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Carlin, for sending people my way. And I wish I could thank each and every one of you individually, every single subscriber who has come to this channel and found something of value, especially if you have commented, shared, liked a video, and subscribed. I appreciate it so much. It is not for me that I do this, though. This is for the kids. This is for the kids. This is also for the parents. I was a kid once, I remember it, and I'm a parent now. So, as a parent, I'm very concerned about the world into which I will be sending my 3 daughters, as I'm sure most of the parents here watching this are about their own kids. So, I do this for them and for you to help your own children, because I know what kind of pain it can be to worry about your kids and to look around the world and, wonder what it's going to be like with these crazy ideas floating around. Who will be their friends? Who will be their partners, spouses, bosses, future professors, whatever it might be. I know what it is to be concerned about this. So, thank you for being here. But today's video is about John Taylor Gatto and about this wonderful book, Dumbing Us Down. Today's chapter of the day is the Green Monongahela, which is apparently a river area 40 miles southwest of Pittsburgh. It's about that, but it's about a whole lot more than that. This chapter is actually an essay that Gatto wrote, and he was awarded first prize, the Geraldine Dodge Foundation Columbia University National Essay Contest. He was awarded the first prize on that for this essay, and I will tell you, in all sincerity, that this chapter brought tears to my eyes. It's been happening a lot lately. Chloe Valderi wrote an essay that made me tear up. I'm not usually that emotional a person, but I think when I start thinking about kids in school or just in life and what they are learning and what they are not learning, what they're missing out on, I get pretty upset. I am blessed to have lived at the time when I lived. I was born in 1966. I remember the 70s. I grew up in the 70s. I had, not the greatest childhood in terms of my home life, but looking back on it, I'm so appreciative that I lived at a time when I could just walk outside my house. And ironically, there was more crime, more to worry about than there is now statistically, but we weren't aware of it. And so I was, like many kids of the time period, a latchkey kid, especially with a troubled home life. And I just went out the door and went in search of adventure. And I had friends who didn't live right nearby, but I could walk down the street or walk to the next part of the neighborhood, look for the pile of bicycles and find people to hang out with and learn from and watch life happen. We would take walks when we started middle school. We would walk to the school, walking through the town, walking past the people going to work. We just kind of lived in the world to a greater degree than kids do today. And I now understand why when my kids watch Stranger Things with me, they watched the scenes from the early 80s and they said, Mom, why can it be like that? Why isn't it like that? They were so envious of me. I never thought that. When I was a kid, I never thought my children would grow up envying me, the life that I was living, for those reasons, because I could just go outside and be and not have somebody hovering over me. And even though I have tried not to hover over my children because everybody else's parents are doing it, that puts pressure on you to do the same. You feel like I'm supposed to be afraid or I'm supposed to be concerned. And also, we're living more urbanized lives. We have 24-hour news telling us to, think and do things and be afraid of things that our kids pick up on too. So even if I tell them, as I have done recently, go outside, go to the park, go ride your bike, but I don't know anybody, I don't know where to go, they pick up on it, even if I haven't told them. They get it from popular culture. They get it from their friends. Their friends' parents are hovering. After a point, there's little you as an individual parent can do to help your child have that kind of childhood if they're not getting it, if it's not in the culture, if it's not going on in the school, if the school gives a different message, if the other kids are going to those schools giving a different message. So it matters to all of us. And that's why this chapter made me tear up, because I realized I didn't have the kind of childhood he had, and my kids didn't have the kind of childhood I have. And instead of the American dream of giving our children something better than we had, we may be giving them materially more than we had. in some ways more security, but in others far less. And that's what he does. He starts off writing about his childhood on the Monongahela River in the 1940s and how it made him a teacher. Listen to some of these experiences he had as a child. He said, on the river, I drank my first Iron City at 8, smoked every cigarette obtainable, watched dangerous men and women make love there at night on blankets all before I was 12. It was my laboratory. I learned to watch closely and draw conclusions there. From all over town, young boys run gazing in awe 12 times a day. No one ever became indifferent to the steamers. These are steamboats going back and forth, because nothing important can ever really be boring. You can see the difference, can't you, between those serious boats and the truly boring spacecraft of the past few decades, just flying junk without a purpose a boy can believe in. Now, this made me stop and think. We have SpaceX. We're sending rockets to space and bringing them back. And I marvel at that, and my husband does too. My kids aren't even aware of it. Even when I try to make them aware of it, they're sort of blasé. They're so cynical. They're, whatever. And why is that? Do you see it covered on the news? This should be newsworthy, right? It's not. Even that's not newsworthy. They were so busy covering the second impeachment of the last president or some other alleged outrage that isn't really outrageous if you think about it. And they're not talking about human achievements. I mean, we developed a vaccine for a virus causing a deadly pandemic around this world. And in less than a year, that should be like the top story. Kids should be marveling at the scientists and the researchers who developed that. They should be hearing what a great human achievement that is. And instead, they're being made afraid. There's a new crop of fears about the vaccine. We should be scared. We should be wary of it. Don't take it. There's this danger and that danger. It seems like what should have us in awe and should make us marvel and should inspire kids to dream is turned into something ugly and scary every minute of every day. And so I think he's talking about these spacecraft as if they're boring, not because they actually are boring, but it's just the way that kids have access to this information. First of all, they're not going outside their home and looking up in the sky and seeing spacecraft. No, they'd have to hear about it secondhand. And they're not really. And to the extent that they are, it's commercialized or it's dumbed down to how is it or isn't it outraging somebody or making somebody frustrated or angry or dominating the news, beyond something that does. Whatever. It's just, unless it explodes, they're not even going to talk about it. And it's also not something that the kids can really relate to, especially kids who live in some of the areas where they're having really real, big real problems. They can't relate to a spacecraft going up and down the same way a boy could run down to the river and relate to or be awed by a boat going up and down the river, actually doing something, working, performing a service, something they might connect to their life, their town, jobs, etc. So, and he also talks about the people, the community where he grew up in this area. The brakeman and engineer would step among snot-nosed kids and spin railroad yarns, let us run in and out of boxcars, over and under flat cars, tank cars, coal cars, and numbers of other specialty cars whose function we memorized as easily as we memorized enemy plane silhouettes. This was during World War II. Once a year, maybe we got taken onto the caboose that reeked of stale beer to be offered a bologna on white bread sandwich. The anonymous men lectured, advised, and inspired the boys of Monongahela. That was as much their job as driving the trains. And this stood out to me because I thought, how many parents would allow their young children of 8 or 9 to run in and out of railroad cars and talk to the people who work there, total strangers? We're constantly telling our children to be afraid of strangers. And I'm not saying that there aren't dangers. And I'm not saying that kids should be naive and innocent and just trust every person who comes along. But think of how many things they're not learning. Hillary Clinton is famous for saying it takes a village. But do we really believe it? And what I mean by that is, what village was she talking about, and what village are we allowing to raise our children? We're allowing the village contained inside these buildings of schools, of people that don't necessarily share our values, share our lives. They aren't from our literal community where we live. Oftentimes our kids get on buses and ride for, 40 minutes to an hour that doesn't, not an hour away, but just because of traffic to get to a school we're told is better for them. So they're removed that much farther from their community where they live and from their family. And the strangers inside the building, they're told to trust, strangers who have an agenda, administrators who have an agenda, teachers who have an agenda, which we never agreed to, but don't trust the strangers that probably don't have an agenda, who are driving the bus or walking on by or in the town, and they don't get to be in the town. They get, if they are, they're considered truant or causing a problem. And oftentimes they are actually truant and causing a problem at that point because they've had no experience being in the world like this. And people are wary of children too. Very wary. Strangers are wary of a child. I've been places with my children, and it's during the school week, and they'll get asked, why aren't you in school? And you can see the look of worry and fear on their face of what is this, parentless child doing in my store? And I come up behind them and say, oh, we're homeschoolers. But they're afraid. They're afraid for my child. They're afraid I'm an abuser. They're afraid they're going to be accused of abuse, or somebody else might take this child. Everybody's afraid. They're afraid of children. They're afraid for children. There's a constant feeling of fear. And here are these 8 to 10-year-old boys talking to strangers working on the railroad. And he's learning so much about the world of work, the world of industry, the world of, and by industry, I don't mean, a factory. I mean, being productive, out there doing something every day. Kids today have no concept of what people do for a living. Very little. They might know about YouTubers and gamers, and they might know about race car drivers and NBA and NFL sports personalities and movie stars and celebrities. But do they, or maybe what mom and dad does, maybe. But do they know what just regular everyday people do? Do they know what's involved in a day of work for most people? Probably not. I was arrested 3 times growing up in Monongahela, or rather picked up by the police and taken to jail to await a visit from Pappy to spring me. I wouldn't trade those times for anything. The first time I was 9, caught on my belly under a parked car at night, half an hour after curfew. In 1943, blinds were always drawn in the Monongahela Valley for fear that Hitler's planes would somehow find a way to reach across the Atlantic to our steel mills lining both banks of the river. The Nazis were apparently waiting for a worried mother to go searching for her child with a flashlight after curfew when whammo, down would swoop the Teutonic Air Fleet. He would go out after curfew alone. 3 times he was arrested while living there as a kid, but not really arrested, just, picked up. Another time I speared a goldfish in the town fish pond and was brought from jail to the library where I was sentenced to read for a month about the lives of animals. That's what he was told to do. What happens today for kids who get arrested for very serious crimes? There are 10 and 11-year-old boys in Chicago. I can't remember what they call them. There's a name for them. They're murderers. They're killers. They're 10 and 11, and they're assassins for gangs, in part because they can't be tried as adults. That's happening today. So fast forward, I'll just sum it up for you, that section. He says, I learned to teach from being taught by everyone in town, where I learned to teach the love of work from being asked to shoulder my share of responsibility. Even as a boy, and where I learned to find adventures I made myself from the everyday stuff around me, the river and the people who lived alongside it. He says that taught him to be a teacher, but he didn't realize it. He didn't realize it until much, much later. So he's looking back and saying that all these experiences of just being in the world and treating people as you find them, and not walking into experiences afraid, trusting yourself and your own abilities to get through it, whatever it is. And then he talks about how he went to work in advertising when he got out of school. He was making a lot of money, actually, writing jingles, ads, and he talks about how the job was the kind of job he could, put in maybe like a couple hours a week, get his job done. And the rest of it was spent at, power breakfasts and martini lunches and things like that. And he said, it bothered me that all the urgencies of the job were generated externally. It bothered me more that the work I was doing seemed to have very little importance, even to the people who are paying for it. Worst of all, the problems this work posed were cut from such a narrow spectrum that it was clear the past, present, and future were to be of a piece. A 29-year-old man's work was no different from a 39-year-old man's work or a 49-year-old man's work, though there didn't seem to be any 49-year-old copywriters. I had no idea why not. So one day he left. He just left. They told him he was crazy. He said he was leaving the year he was getting profit sharing. Like before he got it, he just couldn't do it anymore. And they told him he was a moron. He said he was going to teach junior high school. They said to him, in New York City, we don't have schools. We have pens for lost souls. Teaching is a scam, a welfare project for losers who can't do anything else. And before somebody says, well, haven't you said something similar on this channel? No, I've never said anything quite that over generalizing or rude. And I was a classroom teacher, remember. I certainly wasn't a loser. And there are many fine teachers out there slogging it away and trying to do the best they can in a system. Probably they went into it for the same reason he did. They wanted to make a difference. I know I did. I sincerely wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be better than the teachers I had. I wanted to help kids not feel stupid in school like I had initially. And he said their scorn only made him firmer in his resolve. So he started as a substitute teacher. He didn't have a certification. He didn't go to school to be a teacher. After all, he was a copywriter. He was a writer, period. And he really didn't like it at first. He hated it. He talks about how the bells, buzzers, the drab teacher food in the cafeterias, the unpressed clothing, the inexplicable absence of conversation about children among the teachers. To this day, after 30 years in the business, I can honestly say I've never once heard an extended conversation about children or about teaching theory in any teacher's room I've been in. And he was just about done in. And he went to, there was a story about where he went to sub at a school where he was explicitly told, don't let the students do what this class is for. It was a typing class and he was the sub. And the principal came in and said, don't let them type. You're not certified to do it. You're not an expert, so don't do it. And of course, they began to type the second the principal walked out of the room. And he came running back in and, did you let them type? No, sir, but I think they want to. And well, use your resources, figure it out. Don't let them type. And he realized that was his first lesson in, you're not an expert. You don't have the proper training. We know what's best. We administrators, you do what we say. And there are plenty of teachers who run into that today still, who are battling on two fronts. And I'll share with you, hopefully later today, if not tomorrow, an article written by one of them who finally quit this year because she said, I can fight the administration telling me what to do, or I can fight the parents and the kids, but I can't do both. And she quit. And that's what's facing the really good teachers right now. They perceive this fight. They don't want to fight it. They don't want to choose. Many just choose administrators. They please administrators and forget the kids or the parents. And he didn't want to choose. So, or she didn't want to choose rather. And I'll tell you about her in another video, but he started to pick up on this, that, you got to be an expert and they'll tell you what to do. And so he then got called for another assignment to an elementary school. And this is how it happened. It was a third grade assignment, a school on 107th Street in Manhattan. It was 99% Hispanic students, 100% Hispanic teachers. And he said, like many desperate teachers, I lolled most of the day listening to the kids read one after another and expending most of my energy trying to shut the audience up. So one child reads, the others have to listen. This class had a very low ranking because they were ranking, this is the slow class and that's the fast class, whatever. And he said, this class had a very low ranking and no one was able to put more than 3 or 4 words together without stumbling. All of a sudden, though, a little girl named Milagros sailed through a selection without making a mistake. After class, I called her over to my desk and asked why she was in this class of bad readers. She replied that the administration, wouldn't let her out because, as they explained to her mother, she was a really bad reader who had fantasies of being a better reader than she was. But look, Mr. Gatto, my brother's in the 6th grade and I can read every word in his English book better than he can. I was a little intrigued, but truthfully, not much. Surely the authorities knew what they were doing. I mean, he was from the outside. He's coming in. He's thinking, I don't have training. They do. What do I know? Right. And believe me, I felt that way till I was at the end of my first year of classroom teaching. And I realized, no, you don't know. So he then explained, he gave her a sixth grade book. She could read at sixth grade level. She was in third grade. He explained if she did well, he would take her case to the principal. Wasn't sure why he decided to do that, but he did. He didn't expect anything. Milagros, on the other hand, expected justice. Diving into The Devil and Daniel Webster, please tell me you understand a third grader today, probably even most sixth graders couldn't read this. The Devil and Daniel Webster, she polished off the first 2 pages without a gulp. My God, I thought, this is a real reader. What is she doing here? Well, maybe it was a simple accident, easily corrected. I sent her home, promised to argue her case. Little did I suspect what a hornet's nest my request to have Milagros move to a better class would stir up. You have some nerve, Mr. Gatto. I can't remember when a substitute ever told me how to run my school before. Have you taken specialized courses in reading? No. Well, then suppose you leave these matters to the experts. But the kid can read. What do you suggest? I suggest you test her, and if she isn't a dummy, get her out of the class she's in. Remember, he's still a copywriter. He's a substitute teacher. He doesn't realize you don't talk like that to these people. I don't like your tone. None of our children are dummies, Mr. Gatto, and you will find that girls like Milagros have many ways to fool amateurs like yourself. Now think about the contradiction in this. The principal is indignant that he's used the word dummies to talk about the kids who can't read in the class. Like it's, she's defending them personally. How dare you? While insulting the other child, accusing her of faking it. I mean, the nerve, right? So it just struck me as funny. It's like, don't you dare call them dummies. How dare you call them names as I disregard them, disrespect them, and expect nothing from them? I mean, this is the culture of school. I'm telling you, I felt the same when I was a teacher. They would talk about groups of children with they were just so saintly and perfect and wonderful, and then you try to advocate for an individual child and it's like, oh, well, he's lying. Well, he's faking. Well, he's this. Well, she's that. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, you don't care about them as individuals. You think of them in the abstract. It's about you. It's not about them. And he started to pick up on that too. So she accused the kid of memorizing the story, couldn't possibly have read it for herself. And now John Taylor Gatto's like, I'm going to be this kid's champion. Didn't know why, but he insisted on doing it. He still thought in the back of his mind, maybe the principal's right. Maybe I'm wrong, but I want her to have the chance just because I don't like the tone the principal took. So he warned the girl, she better know how to read it, better, know the vocabulary from the advanced reader because she was going to be tested on this. The following Wednesday after school, I waited in the room for Milagros' ordeal to be over. At 3:30, she shyly opened the door of the room. How'd it go? I asked. I don't know, she answered, but I didn't make any mistakes. Mrs. Hefferman was very angry, though, I could tell. I saw Mrs. Hefferman, the principal, early the next morning before school opened. It seems we've made a mistake with Milagros, she said curtly. She will be moved, Mr. Gatto. Her mother has been informed. I bet she was racking her brain trying to figure out a way to keep that kid in the class. Several weeks later, when I got back to the school to sub, Milagros dropped by telling me she was in the fast class now and doing very well. She also gave me a sealed card. When I got home that night, this is where I got a little verklempt. I found it unopened in my suit coat pocket. I opened it and saw a gaudy birthday card with blue flowers on it. Opening the card, I read, "A teacher like you cannot be found." Signed, your student Milagros. That simple sentence made me a teacher for life. It was the first praise I'd ever heard in my working existence that had any meaning. I never forgot it, though I never saw Milagros again and only heard of her again in 1988, 24 years later. Then one day I picked up a newspaper and read, Occupational Teacher Award. Milagros M., United Federation of Teachers, has won the Distinguished Occupational Teacher Award of the State Education Department for demonstrated achievement and exemplary professionalism. A secretarial studies teacher at Norman Thomas High School, New York City, from which she graduated, Miss M. was selected as a Manhattan Teacher of the Year in 1985 and was nominated the following year for Women of Conscience Award given by the National Council of Women. Ah, Milagros, is it just possible that I was your Monongahela River? No matter, a teacher like you cannot be found. One teacher, one child, one fantastic success story. How many others did he touch? Did he change? And when you read the book, because I can't possibly read every bit to you, you will find that he did things in his classroom that were completely unconventional such as take his kids out of the classroom, not just take them, but send them. There's a story he told where he took a mother and her child. He got them bus tickets. He put them on a bus all the way down to the Jersey Shore to apologize to somebody there and clean up a mess that the girl had made, to teach her humility and responsibility. Administration never knew about it, or it wouldn't have happened. And his career is full of stories like that, where he decided that he wasn't going to get done what he needed to get done in the school framework. So he colored outside the lines, but he was only able to do that after being there a certain amount of time and, earning the space to be left alone and not questioned. Most people today don't have that luck, and they scrutinize you a lot more for some of the reasons I gave. People are afraid of children. People are afraid for children. People are just afraid. And if we've learned nothing in the last year, it is that too many people are too afraid of everything, life especially. And if you are afraid of life, if you are afraid of every possible risk, everything that could go wrong, you really can't teach effectively. You can't learn effectively. You can't really function effectively. And as I said in my video about stop begging the schools to reopen, it's time for us to stop being so afraid and projecting so much fear onto our children, because it's making them utterly terrified and anxious and depressed. And we can sit there and blame lockdowns, and we can blame schools being closed, and we can blame all of these things that are really just exacerbators of a problem that has existed for decades now. And that is that we have pulled our kids out of the world and pulled them out of life at the same time. And I think the lesson of this chapter from his book is that we have not just dumbed them down intellectually, but we have dumbed them down emotionally, and we have deprived them of the ability to become the learner and the teacher they were born to be. Even if they never teach another person beside their own child, they have the ability within them, and we've taken it away from them. So that's what I got out of this chapter. I'm not going to actually add any written pieces of it because I read it to you and it's an essay, and you can get a copy. I will when there are more fact-based pieces of information, because I want you to see the statistics, or I want you to see that. But this, I feel like I've covered it by reading it. So I hope you will understand that. And I also want to get this out as quickly as possible. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Like this video, comment on this video, share this video. That's the video.